Vladimir Putin is kind of like your boss. You don't like him, you don't trust him, but you absolutely do need him to pay your bills. Now, it's been a long time since we talked about Putin here on VisualPolitik, and I know what you're thinking now. Again, Simon, are we really going to talk about oil? I mean, do it to death, why don't you? Well, actually, this time, we're not talking about oil exactly. We're talking about natural gas. Now, many of you might think that these are actually very similar things, because at the end of the day, countries with oil reserves usually have gas reserves too. But there is a difference. Oil markets are way more diversified. For example, Europe buys 30% of their crude oil from Russia, but when it comes to the gas, the number rises to 40%. But if we look at each individual European country, the dependency is way higher. Germany imports 60% of their gas from Russia, and other countries like Finland and the Baltics depend entirely on Russian gas. In other words, Putin could leave these countries freezing on a cold, cold winter night that would honestly make Game of Thrones look kind of like Baywatch. But hold on a minute here, because there's more to this resource than heating. In fact, we need natural gas for many other things. In fact, domestic consumption is just a third of the total. As you can see on this chart, another third is for thermal power plants, but the biggest share is used by various industries. For example, a paper manufacturing company needs thermal energy. This means heat. In order to get this heat, the factory uses gas, and the same goes for many, many other industries. In other words, gas is extremely important to everybody, and that includes Europe. And now, can you guess who is the biggest consumer of gas in all of Europe? Yep, of course, that would be Germany, the most populous country on the continent and also the one with the largest economy. And this is the key to our story. Because as long as Germany remains so dependent on Russia, all of Europe is going to depend on Russia too. And this is why, during the 2018 NATO summit, Donald Trump said things like this.
Germany is totally controlled by Russia because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO.
All right, so the question today, is Trump right when he criticizes Germany? Is it really a problem that Germany has such a high dependency on Russian gas? And more importantly, is there a true attempt to reduce that dependency? Well, today we're going to answer all of those questions, but as always, before we do, let's take a look back at the history.
Our man in Berlin.
There are two ways of transporting gas. The cheapest one is through a pipeline. This means we build a huge pipe that goes from the place we take the gas, say the Yamal Peninsula in Russia, to the country that buys it, for example, Germany. This is very cheap because you just need to build the pipe and there you go. There's no need for trucks, there's no need for ships, there's nothing like that. Since you transport the gas through the pipes, it comes to the power plants, the houses and the factories all directly. There is also an alternative method though, and that's so-called liquefied natural gas, or LNG. So, how does this work? Well, let's say we take our gas from Qatar. Then what we do is we lower its temperature until it's 161 Celsius below zero. This is the point when the gas becomes liquid and you can store it in bottles. These bottles can then be stored on a ship and sent to, say, Barcelona in Spain. There they have a regasification plant where they heat the liquid until it becomes gas again. The gas then goes to the national pipe network, and that's when it's transported to houses and factories and things like that. So, well, what's the advantage of this process? Well, it allows Europe to diversify their gas providers easily. But what's the problem? It's 50 to 70% more expensive than using those pipelines we mentioned previously. And this is why European countries buy their gas from the closest producers who are using pipelines. For example, the biggest supplier of Spain is Algeria, but the northern countries, they buy gas from Norway and especially Russia. As we said before, countries like Rosneft or Lukoil export more than half of the gas consumed in Germany. And, well, what about the countries located between Germany and Russia? Well, they have an even deeper dependency. Just have a look at this map. If you pay attention, you'll see how Poland depends on Russian gas for 75% of its needs. Other countries like Finland and Romania, they go all the way up to 100%. In other words, half of Europe needs Russia in order to simply survive. And this is no secret. The European Commission, they know about it, and believe me, Vladimir Putin knows about it too.
Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change course. Here in the Western Hemisphere, we are committed to maintaining our independence from the encroachment of expansionist foreign powers.
But let's pause the video here for just a moment. Right here we can see the German delegation laughing at Trump. He just said that Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy. This means if they were already dependent, they will become even more dependent. So what is he talking about exactly? Well, let's rewind the video. Remember this name, Gerhard Schröder. He is the former German Chancellor, the predecessor of Angela Merkel. He still maintains a massive influence in German and European politics. And, well, what does he do now? Well, actually, he's building this.
Former NATO chief Rasmussen. Germany walks into Putin's trap, Nord Stream 2.
Basically, Nord Stream 2 is a brand new pipeline that would go under the Baltic Sea, connecting Germany with Russia with no middleman. With this new pipeline, Germany could double their import of Russian gas. And this project has a shareholder committee with companies like the Russian giant Gazprom. And the president of this committee is, of course, Mr. Schröder. If this isn't enough, the former German chancellor is also the president of Rosneft, a Russian oil company. This is why in the last 10 years, Schröder has become Putin's man in Europe. In fact, he has defended Russia in all kinds of matters, from the cyber attacks against the Estonian government to the Crimean invasion. In other words, far from reducing their dependence on Russia, Germany is going in the opposite direction. So what were those Germans laughing about? Honestly, I don't have any idea. But alright, I know what you're thinking right now. Well, what's the problem with depending quite so much on Russia? Maybe it's because Putin's an authoritarian ruler. But seriously, it's not, because if that was the case, where else would we buy gas from? I mean, the other list of suppliers includes Azerbaijan, Algeria, and Qatar, which of course we all know are healthy democracies governed by wonderful people. But look, the reality is no one really gives a shit about democracy and human rights when it comes to having heating in their homes. No, the problem with depending on Russia is something else, and that's something you're going to understand right now.
Russiaholics.
In the year 2006, Gazprom wanted the Ukrainians to pay 6 times more for gas, and this was a 100% political move. For decades, Russia and Ukraine had this really good relationship, and then the Orange Revolution began. When Viktor Yushchenko came to power with his anti-Russian and pro-European rhetoric, the Kremlin essentially said this: "Alright, Ukraine, well, if you want to go and hang out with your cool European friends and forget about us, well, get your wallet out, because it's going to be expensive." Think about it. Building a brand new pipeline with another country, it takes years. So Ukraine, they just couldn't find a new supplier overnight. If Putin wanted, he could raise prices at will. And if Ukraine doesn't want to pay it, well, Russia will just close the pipe.
For 3 days, in the middle of a cold wave, Ukrainians had no heating at home. And after a tense negotiation, Ukraine agreed to pay double for the gas. In exchange, it raised the fee that Russia had to pay in order to cross the country and transport the gas to the rest of Europe.
But this was just the beginning. In the year 2009, we had the same problem, but rather king-sized. Russia wanted Ukraine to pay more for their gas once again. Kiev and Moscow started insulting each other, and in this case, it was not only Ukraine that went without gas for days, it was also the rest of Europe, and that included the Czech Republic, Italy, Poland, and of course, Germany. Yes, dear viewers, most of that Russian gas comes comes through Ukraine, so if Ukrainians have no gas, the chances are other Europeans are going to be freezing too. Again, the story ended with Ukraine paying more for their gas in exchange for more transport fees. Nevertheless, just like Game of Thrones, Putin's tune is a song of ice and fire. After freezing Europeans in 2006 and 2009, 2014, well, it was the year of fire. And the fire came in a Ukrainian province called Crimea. Because, as you know, Russians took it. And so what did the European Union do in this case? Well, they just came to Putin and essentially said, Putin, you're a very naughty boy. We're going to sanction you, and you will write these lines 20 times over. I will not invade other countries. I will not invade other countries. I will not invade other countries. Now, Ukraine is more of a headache than anything else, but that's something we're going to cover in the next video of this series. Because yes, we are doing a series all about Russian gas, and if you don't want to miss it, well, you know what to do. There's a subscribe button below and a bell, and do your thing. So now Europe has two options. Putin and Schroeder, they want to build new pipelines to bypass Ukraine. That is the first option. The second one is what the European Union wants, and that's to find other gas suppliers. But, well, can they really do that? Now, pay attention because we're going to answer that question.
Attempts to diversify.
The fastest way of diversifying is, you guessed it, buying liquefied natural gas. Now, it is expensive, but countries do not need to wait to build new pipelines. So what's the problem here? Well, LNG ships are too busy with the Asian market. Basically, the Pacific Ocean is full of these ships that can go from Australia, Qatar, and Malaysia to Japan, China, and Korea. You see, in Asia, gas prices are higher than anywhere else, so good luck convincing America or Qatar to sell you their natural gas when they're getting rich off Asia. This is why the most realistic option is to build new pipelines. The question is, though, where? Now, on the one hand, we have Norway, but Europe already buys all of the gas they produce. Going south, we have Spain, who wants to build the MidCat, a pipeline that would connect Algeria with Northern Europe. But France is not very excited about the idea because that would mean they have to build the whole net in order to sell to other countries. And, well, you know, oh man, this is so much work. Maybe tomorrow or, you know, maybe never. Maybe never. Never sounds good. Alright, so the most serious alternative so far is the so-called Trans-Adriatic Pipeline, or TAP. This is meant to be finished by 2020. This pipeline goes from Azerbaijan, crosses Turkey, and goes all the way into Italy. But wait a minute, because this still is not enough. This pipeline has a maximum capacity of 20 billion cubic meters of gas. This isn't even half the capacity of the Nord Stream 2 that connects Germany and Russia. But this is not the only problem. When it comes to oil, Putin is a very jealous boyfriend, and if you thought he would put up with so much gas promiscuity, well, you're very wrong.
Gazprom says gas transit via Ukraine to Europe may fall to 10 to 15 billion cubic meters per year.
With this move, Putin kills two birds with one stone. First, he's forcing Europe to follow him, and on top of that, he bypasses Ukraine. But this is not the end of the story here. In the south, Putin is also pushing to build brand new pipes. And yes, dear viewers, if you thought Gerhard Schroeder is the only friend of Vladimir Putin in Europe, well, you're very, very wrong.
Hungary wants Russia's Turkish Stream pipeline to be extended into Europe.
But still, there are 2 points we haven't dealt with here. For one, we have to talk about Ukraine. Can Putin totally bypass them? On top of that, we should definitely talk about Azerbaijan, another dictatorship that will become Europe's best friend. So if you don't want to miss those stories, do subscribe to this channel. Meanwhile, I've got a question for you. Do you think Putin can reduce its dependency on Russia? Or do you think Putin will become the Night King with enough power to turn Europeans into White Walkers? Well, please leave your answer in the comment section below. Also, do visit the Reconsider Media podcast, the podcast that provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And as always, I'll I'll see you next time.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear more of my lovely voice, don't forget to check out the Reconsider podcast at reconsidermedia.com. Reconsider is a podcast that challenges you to reconsider your views by providing context, but we don't do the thinking for you.